It's Out of Bounds.
Yesterday, in our closing story, we addressed what's become one of the largest sexual abuse cases going to court. Our national shame, USA Gymnastics. The years of abuse from team physician Larry Nassar and enabling of that abuse from USA Gymnastics and Michigan State University, where he was employed and treated athletes. As this trial continues, hours upon hours of painful and strong testimony from victims, many are now wondering how this could happen and how those that enabled need to be held accountable. A Detroit News report that 14 Michigan State employees knew has the editorial board of Michigan State students' newspaper asking for University President Lou Anna Simon to step down. Also today, many wondering whether the silence now from the NCAA is symptomatic of the greater problem. National problem, we could start with questions like Jay Billis asked today, wondering where the NCAA is and viewing the inaction with interest in regards to how they acted against Penn State. But Pablo, I'll start with you. How should the NCAA view this?
Well, the NCAA, as Jay Billis pointed out, has one example of precedent, so to speak, to look at. And the thing about this case is that it is not like Penn State in so many ways. And it is bigger than Penn State in so many ways. At the least of all is scale. The sheer scale, the number of victims. We're talking about 150 lawsuits, apparently, that are being pursued right now. We're talking about 20 years dating back to the first alleged victim to come out and talk about this, Larissa Boyce, in 1997. We're talking about, according to the Detroit News, 14 people at Michigan State who were allegedly complicit in this. So this is, in some sense, the biggest challenge the NCAA has faced in terms of how do we, as a sports organization, punish. And I don't envy their position, but they should be aware that this is unlike anything else they've dealt with, and we should be aware of that too.
Clinton Yates?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we talk about the NCAA because it's how we get into this as a sports story. But as far as I'm concerned, this is much bigger than that. This is a firings and this is a law enforcement situation. If you think about the level of institutional lack of control that had to go on here in order for this to continue, we're not talking about an assistant football coach. We're talking about a doctor. That vastly changes what the relationship is between these alleged victims and what he did. I think it is, frankly, scarier on some levels, in my opinion, in terms of what they're going to have to do to find out all of the problems here. It is not a good circumstance, but listen, to me, what the NCAA does is almost irrelevant to me as a human being on this earth. I think people deserve to be behind bars as a result of what went down in East Lansing.
Tim Kalishaw?
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues. It's an incredibly awful story, and nobody really at this point needs to worry about Michigan State sanctions. That will come over time. You need to wait and see. It's hard to know initially the complaints, where they went, and how much the gymnastics coach passed on, and how long it took to get to the next level, and how soon it got to the president. As Pablo said, this has been going on, these reports, since 1997, and this is very difficult compared to the horrific Penn State case, where many of the crimes were happening right there in the locker room and coaches knew about them, and how they handled or mishandled the information was a big part of the case. This is in a doctor's office, and we tend to have way too much belief and power of this is a doctor. He's an Olympic doctor. These stories can't possibly be true, and I think that's why it dragged on for so many years.
Woody Page?
I don't know that I even want the NCAA to do an investigation. I don't trust the NCAA in an investigation of this type. I don't like the way that the NCAA handled the Penn State scandal. They changed, the officials there at the NCAA office changed their mind. They went back and forth on what they did. I think that you leave it up to as Pablo talked about, there are more than 150 civil cases. There are investigative authorities in the police departments and grand juries that should be doing the investigation, not the NCAA. Then the NCAA, after it sees what occurs in society, it can react in regard to the athletic programs in Michigan State. But I think right now the best thing for the NCAA is to stay out of the way.
Pablo, you want to add to that?
Yeah, and one thing that's relevant to the NCAA's purview, so many of these victims are actual college athletes, and not just any college athletes, the faces of the sport. This is different from Penn State in that regard. I'm not comparing the morality of the cases or the victims, but my God, this is so squarely in their purview as the institution overseeing college sports.
Yeah. But still, I mean, Larissa Boyce, you brought her up, the first athlete to come forward. She's giving her statement this week. She asked the university president to attend in the courtroom to support her and heard back from the university president that the schedule was full. But here's a compromise. I'll watch the live stream. That's the whole thing here. The callousness, the lack of regard for female athletes, the systemic sexism in this country. If we're asking how does this happen, and this is Nasser, this is Sandusky, this is the church, this is Me Too, this is Time's Up. It lives in silence. So we have to be able to talk about the uncomfortable. Predators thrive in silence and the distraction of our culture, even decent people. The hope that somebody else will speak up. I'm tired, I'm not going to speak up. This needs to be the biggest story in America.